Yeah. Another common function or another common simple requirement which we generally have in our work is, let's assume that this data is a running sequence data, which is already a running sequence data, right? And I always say find the sum of, or find the average share price of ICICI Bank in the last 10 days, or share price of any selected bank, whether it is ICICI or HDFC or something. This is a very good case study to work on, right? Let's assume here that any, let's say tomorrow's data I enter at the bottom. Probably the ICICI bank data will get entered here, or even if it gets entered to the bottom, let's say an immediate sorting will happen, right? Even tomorrow I enter ICICI bank data here. I mean, I enter the share price data for tomorrow for all the banks here, ICICI, HDFC and all, for the next day, 2nd November. So 3rd November or 4th November, I'll enter it here, right? And after that, I sort the data based on the bank as well as the date. So obviously, the ICICI bank data will go to probably the first few locations. Now, okay, otherwise, let's make it simple first. Let's assume that this data contains only Union Bank, right? We'll improvise it slightly later. Let's say this data contains only Union Bank, right? So the Union Bank data keeps adding up every day like this. Every day it gets added up. Now my objective is find the average share price of the last 10 days. Last 10. I don't want for the whole column. I don't want based on conditions. If I want the whole column, we use the average formula. If I want for the based on a condition, we have used average if kind of formulas. But my question is last 10 days, right? So if I assume that this is the data, right? What is the mechanism we will use for average of last 10 days? Average of last 10, if I want to find out, I'll simply use average formula. If I have to go in a traditional sense, I'll use the average formula, and probably I'll go to this D column, just select the 10. I'll go to this 10 and I select this 10. This is what I'll do. If I want the average of the last 10 elements, I'll simply use the average formula and select this last 10. Fair enough, no issues. I am getting 204.305, which is pretty much correct. But now one more day got added, right? I've just copied it, but let's assume one more day got added here. Now what should happen? The average should be based on these 10. which is saying that the average is 203.99. Right? If I am selecting the last 10 now, the average is 203.99. But what is happening to my formula? This is not changing. My data is changing. Getting the point here? I don't want between this date to this date. If that's the case, I can say greater than or equal to this, less than or equal to this, just like the way we have done yesterday. Right? We can, or just like average ifs, we have used multiple mechanisms. I don't want that. I am more interested in last 10 days. First of all, I cannot count. Right. Which you want? Huh. Okay. Average of the entire column. Huh. Then it gives the average of the entire data. It does not give me the average of last 10 days. I want the average of last 10 D values. Huh. But otherwise, how do I select it? I want only last 10. See, I want the, let's assume, I'll make it simpler for you. Let's assume only one bank data is there. Right? Let me copy this into a new sheet. Then I'll try to address the other problem. Let's assume only this much data is there. Right? No new data. Only this much, probably the heading also. Let's keep it. That's it. Only this much data is there. Now what I am saying is that because the data will keep growing, right? This data is a running sequence data. So what I am saying is I want the last 10 days stock price average. These are the last 10 days. I want the average of only the last 10 days, nothing else. Right? So for that, even if I select the whole column, how do I get the last 10 days? It will give the entire average. It will not give the average of only the last 10 days. So if I want it only for the last 10 days, the only alternative for me is select only those 10. But if I am selecting only those 10, then even if a new data is getting added, the average is confined only to those 10. Right? It will not include the new row. Because let's see why it is not. I am saying D243 to D252. So even if I add one more row here, it's only saying 243 to 252. This is not changing. Obviously it has to become actually D244 to D253 to make it last 10. But it is still lying at D243 to D252 only. Because of that, we will not get the updated values. Now, for that, why we are not getting the updated value? Till now our focus has been that we should have dynamicness at a formula level. No explicit constant should be written into the formula. Then it will restrict our dynamicness. Here, the manual thing which we are doing is selection. That selection is not automated. We are manually going and putting a rectangle box across that 10 elements. And wherever the manual involved, that is what is the difference between a basic Excel and an advanced Excel. No formula is advanced in Excel. How we use this kind of dynamicness is what makes the advanced usage of Excel. That rectangle which we are drawing, we draw it manually. Now, if I can draw that rectangle through a formula, then that formula will automatically make that selection dynamic. The moment it makes the selection dynamic, your output will automatically update. And that formula is what is the offset formula. Offset is probably one formula in the entire Excel library which does not give any answer. It gives a rectangle box. It's not an answer. It's a selection. Right? Probably VLOOKUPs, offsets, match, they are giving some answer or the other for us. Right? You give some input, it does some calculation, it gives some output. But offset is one formula which has no meaning in isolation. It's just a selection. What does this mean? This is a selection. What does this mean for me? Unless I do some calculation on it, some average, something on the top of that, there is no meaning to it. It's just like putting a rectangular box in the data. Offset is more like that. Offset in isolation does not have a value or a meaning, whereas it has to be used in combination with either sum or average or something, what you want to do on that selection. Or it can be used for VLOOKUPs, it can be used for anything. Wherever, right from yesterday, if we remember, we have been doing something or the other like this. The whole column selections, which is a manual. Of course, if it is a whole column, no problem, even if it is manual. But if it is a part of the column, if it is manual, that's where right from yesterday I have been saying it's not worth drawing a rectangular box ourselves, because if the new data is added, all our formulas have to be modified again. But if I use offset, I don't need to select the whole column. I can select only a rectangular box, but I will not select, my formula will select that. So depending on if 2 more new rows are added, the offset will include those 2 new rows also as a part of my selection. Whereas if I am doing a manual rectangular box, as we are seeing here, it is not included. Right? Now, how the offset works? Offset is more like a journey. Now, for example, let's say I want the average of this one. This is the average which I want to find out. After that, let me add up some new rows. But for the time being, first thing I want to do is, instead of manually drawing this rectangle from E243 to E252, the first step is, I want Excel to draw this for me. Excel to draw this part E243 to E252 selection. And after that, once it is selected, what is that we are doing? You simply wrote average. The way we have handled this is equal to average. And in this, we have simply selected this part like this. Correct? So what has happened in our formula? It is nothing but average of E243 to E252. If E243 to E252 is given by my offset, all I have to write is average on the top of that. Then it will give me the same answer. So the first step for me is replicate the same number, the same value using the offset function. After that, bring in the dynamicness, which is like you add 2 more rows, the average should be automatically changed. Earlier, the average was not changing. Even if you are adding 2 new rows, in the earlier version, the average was not changing. But by using offset, I want to change that average. Right? So, that's the way we'll start looking at the offset. So, it's like a journey, as I said. So, for me, I want to select this much. So, let me highlight it in some color. So, this is what should be added or averaged. This is what should be averaged. Now, what I am doing is, I'll start my journey from somewhere. System based journey. The best place to start is this one, A1, because it's the starting point of the Excel sheet. Right? Now, my data is in E243 to E252. That's what is my data. And typically when I want the bottom 10, I'll not start from 243, I'll start from 252 generally. If I have to select the last 10, because I don't know from where to start, I start from the bottom, 252, then move my cursor up and up and up until it says 10 rows. Right? So 252 is what I'll start with. Now, I have to take this cursor. I have to take this cursor to row number 252. Right? E252 I have to take the cursor to. How do I take it? It is in A1. So, I have to make it travel some rows down. How many rows it has to go down? So, it is starting from A1. Some rows it is going down. How many rows it has to go down? 251 rows. I mean, I'm starting from 252. The selection I'll do from E252 to upward. Because that's very difficult for me to select from E243. Because that's a manual counting. But from last selecting the last 10 is easier. So I am making it go down 251 rows. So once it goes to 251 rows down, it touches A252. And after that I am instructing it to go 4 columns to the right. Then it touches E252. B, C, D, E. It touches E252. Then I'll say start at E252. Select. So this is what is the starting point of the selection. From there select 10 rows. 10 in the upward direction. So upward direction I will give it as minus 10. Downward direction I will give it as plus 10. So from that cell you select 10 in the upward direction. Those many rows. And how many columns to select? Only one. Because we are talking of only E column. Only one column to select. The moment I give these 5 parameters to the offset, that box is created. So we are starting at some location. A1 is a preferred location until we get a comfort level on that. In any sheet, A1 is a starting location. From there I am going those many rows down up to the selection point. So some rows down, some columns to the right will take me to the starting point of the selection. So these two instructions, 251 and 4, will actually take me to 251 rows down, which will take me to A252, 4 columns to the right, which will take me to E252. The cursor is moving like that. From A1, 251 rows down. This is like 1 row down, 2 rows down, 3 rows down, 251 rows down. Will take it to A252. 4 columns to the right will take it to the E column. So it has already come to E252. With these first 3 instructions, the 4th and 5th are to do with the selection. How many rows to select? how many columns to select? 10 rows in the upward direction. So it will start selecting like this. This is the 10 rows in the upward direction. One column. If it is 2 columns, then probably even this would be selected. But if I put -2 instead of 2, this side will be selected. This side will be selected if I put -2, because towards the left. So because it's only one column here, I'm just putting it as 1. 1 or -1 don't make any difference because it's that same column. Now with this, the selection box is getting created like this. Just with our formula. I don't need to even go and draw like that. Our formula itself will create a selection box like that. Now on the top of that, I can simply write average. Right? Let's try that out. After that, we'll try to bring in the dynamicness. If one more row is added, 2 more rows are added, how will it address that problem? So probably here I'll say average using offset. Where I am saying, first let's use offset, equal to offset, shift F3. Where is that I am starting? A1. That's my reference location. How many rows I am going down? 251. We'll take only this example. We'll try to enhance it slightly later. I have to go 251 rows down. How many columns I am going to the right? 4 columns to the right. I'll go to the E252 now. A1 I started. 251 rows down. A252. 4 columns to the right. E252. -10 rows selected. 1 column selected. So the selection box is that one. Now what happens with this? It has no meaning. As I said, the formula has no meaning because it's actually a box. It's just a selection. Now on the top of this, simply write average. On the top of this, simply write average. Like this. Got the same number. Probably here we have done D, I think. Here we have done it on the D column. This also, let's make it E. So here we did not do any selection now. We have just used the offset formula, which has drawn the box itself and it has updated the thing for us. Just try that out. You're able to replicate it through offset. What about you? You did not try? Okay. Huh? Okay. So now the duplication part. Let's say a couple of new rows get added. Okay, let's add one more row for time being. One more row got added. Right now the average should be the last 10 items. These are the last 10 now. It will not include 209, it should include 223. The average should become 207.03. But right now nothing changed because we did not pull in any dynamicness right now. The only thing we have done right now is replicated the manual selection method through a formula. Instead of manually selecting that rectangular box, the offset was selecting that rectangular box for us. But now I want to make that rectangular box dynamic to solve my purpose of last step. Now just imagine with this situation itself, if one more row is added, one more new row is added, just like the way we have added the 253rd row now. If one more row is added, what will happen to these 5 parameters? A1 will still remain A1. I am starting. This second one will become 252. Instead of 251, my last location will become 252. 4 columns to the right, that will not change. 10 rows will not change. You have to select last 10. Even that will not change. From down to up. So minus 10 is minus 10 itself. Which one? The new one will also, the moment this becomes 252, the second one becomes 252, then right from A1, the cursor will go to A253, then to E253. From there, it will select the 10 in the upward direction. One column. So the only thing that is changing out of these 5 parameters is the second parameter. If I am able to change 251 to 252 dynamically, right? If one more row is added, that should become 253. Right? So that dynamic change can happen only if it is done through a formula. Instead of writing 251 there, if I can replicate that 251 using some formula, so that if one more row is added, it directly becomes 252. If one more row is added, it should become 253. Right? So then the second value is automatically changing to 252, 253, whatever we want. Right? Then our objective is done. Which formula, now you tell me, based on what we have discussed, which such formula can increase, can give the answer increased by 1 if I am adding one more new row from whatever the formulas which we have looked at in the last couple of yesterday and today. Add one more new row, the answer should increase by 1. 2 more rows, the answer should increase by 2. Which formula can help us doing that task for us? No. The number of rows, if I add one more new row, right, the answer of that formula should increase by one more. Count will do that. Count or count A. You add one more row to the data, the value will increase by 1. If I am doing count A, you add one more row to your data, this will be incremented by 1. 2 more rows, the count will get incremented by 2. Because I am doing a count on the whole column. Right? So right now, the count, if it gives me 250, let's say if this data is not there, 253rd row is not there. So the count should give me 251 as the answer. Right? If I am using count, see here in our offset, what is that we have used? These are the numbers we have used. Now I want this 251 to dynamically change. It has to become 252, 253, 254. Now what I am thinking of is, instead of writing 251 there, what if I write a count formula, let's say on the C column. What is the value it is giving? 251. Sorry? No, minus 10 has nothing to do with it. No, I am saying only the count. Count if I am doing on the C column. If I add one more new row, it will become 252. See, right now it is evaluating to 251. Because there are 252 rows. There are 252 rows in total. And first row is a heading. So count will count only the numbers. And dates are like serial numbers only. So that's where it is counting the dates. So that's where it is giving an answer of 251. What will happen? One more new row is added now. It will automatically become 252. Right? So in the offset, it is becoming A1, 252 and so on. So which means the average also will be updated according. Instead of just writing 251 here, if I write it as count of C column, that's also 251 only. But that will change dynamically, whereas 251 will not change dynamically. It remains as constant, whereas count of C will change dynamically if some new rows are added. So wherever we think that something is dynamic, something has to change dynamically, it's better to use the formulas based route rather than typing a constant exclusively into the formula. This is what is one extraordinary formula of offset which could be helpful. Now you see adding one new row. This got changed. You add one more row. The average is getting changed because now the average is taking the last 10. Because automatically that count is incrementing the second parameter of offset. Right? Because the second parameter of offset, if I change, rest all need not be changed. It has to go 10 rows, 251 or 252 or 253 rows down. Some columns to the right, 4 columns to the right always. From there, select 10 in the upward direction. So automatically that selection point is changing. It's no more selecting from your old location. Because the new location has moved, because it has moved 2 rows extra down. So its starting point of selection is changed. From there it is selecting 10 upwards. So obviously it is selecting a new set. On the top of that, the average is getting applied. So, especially if I am making more and more dynamic applications, like running sequence data. Examples are like, okay, my boss asked me to plot the data of last 15 days, to draw a chart of last 15 days data. Not just for one field, but for 5 fields. Last 15 days sales, last 15 days profits, or last 15 days quantity sold, last 15 days revenues, last 15 days expenses, right? And so many other stuff for last 15 days. Every day that last 15 days will change, because it has to include the latest day and it has to exclude the oldest day. If I have to plot those kind of things manually, it's going to be a painful task for me, because manually I have to change the locations every day, and I don't know whether I have changed all the locations or not. So it's like a routine task which becomes more and more mundane. The better thing is, if I'm using offset, I don't need to bother about changing them. Here also, let's say there are 100 such sheets. On each sheet I have to find last 10 days average, which is what stock markets typically do also. Last 10 days average, last 15 days average, 14 days average, 28 days average. They have different mechanisms of computing the averages on a last few days basis. If that's the case, if there are 100 such sheets and for 100 I have to compute the last 15 days averages and all, it's a painful task. Rather than that, if I have done that averaging through this offset formula, it's more and more dynamic. Just add the data, that's it. So the Excel power usage will come under this circumstance, that just whatever the data I want to change, I just change the data. Nothing else I should change. The output should be there for me. That is what we mean by the high powerful usage of Excel. I just need to change the input. Input data is nothing which is in my hold. Input comes from somewhere. So the moment I just enter that input data, rest all needs to be taken care for me without even a minimum effort from my side. At the most, if I require, I just change 1 or 2 small things here and there, but rest of it should be taken care by the system for me. That is what we are meaning by the advanced usage of Excel. Formulas are nowhere advanced. All formulas are basic formulas. But the way I combine multiple formulas to create this kind of dynamic impact, what makes Excel as a very powerful and advanced tool. Right? All are building blocks, simple building blocks. Give some input, it gives some output. No formula is more than a small brick. But the way I assemble all these bricks to construct a kind of a building is what differentiates the powerful usage of Excel. Right? So offset is one such formula to be remembered, especially when people ask me what is one single formula I like in Excel, I generally talk about offset itself. The reason being it has so much of dynamic usage. Probably it is creating wonders by changing the selection region. The moment I have a control on the selection region, I can create all kinds of automation in the data. Right? All right.